Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel, Hydra's Ultimate Weapon. Chapter 1. After the Battle of New York, the Avengers became everyone's heroes. After all, there is a feat of fighting against the alien invaders Chitauri before them. This is a real achievement that cannot be questioned by anyone. Among these admirers, Hydra is not included. The enemy's hero, our enemy. Hydra wants to tear the Avengers apart and chop up all the superheroes inside one by one and feed them to the dogs. This is a hateful thought, and it also shows that Hydra currently has nothing to do with the Avengers. Of course, there is nothing we can do at the moment. Sokovia, Hydra's secret base. The person in charge of this base is Baron Strucker, a man with a solemn expression, a meticulous face, and no smile at all. He wears a monocle on his right eye, and his cold eyes reveal a chill. It can be seen that he is a ruthless person. The Avengers, S.H.I.E.L.D. Baron Strucker looked at the huge petri dish in front of him, opened his mouth and softly said these two words. His tone didn't sound very timid or fearful, but rather a bit sarcastic. Just listen to his soft voice. Said, "When this ultimate weapon of mine is officially forged, that's when all of you will die." I saw a huge petri dish standing in front of Baron Strucker. The petri dish was filled with nutrient liquid, and as the nutrient solution rose and fell, a humanoid creature was vaguely visible floating in the nutrient solution, floating up and down with the waves. By observing it with the naked eye, it can be concluded that it is probably a human being, but compared to ordinary humans in height and body shape, it is obviously much larger, like a giant. Among the Avengers, there is also a giant, that is the well-known Hulk. But the height of the Hulk is only 3 or 4 meters. And the giant in the petri dish is initially judged to be over 5 meters tall. This is still curled up in the petri dish. Because the body is not completely exposed, it has shrunk to a certain extent. In the battle between superhumans, being huge does not mean that the final victory will be achieved, but being large means being powerful, which is an advantage. As for how to turn the advantage into victory depends on the individual's performance. Two figures appeared behind Baron Strucker. They were a pair of twins, whose names are still unknown. But of these two, one has the codename Quicksilver, the other one's name is Wanda. "Did you find anything?" Baron Strucker didn't turn around, and the voice had already been passed on. Sokovia's days have not been stable recently. Baron Strucker noticed from various signs that people from S.H.I.E.L.D. may have tracked them down. S.H.I.E.L.D., the arrival of, means that the conflict will further intensify. The Avengers are about to appear. The Avengers are like sharks that smell blood. If they smell the breath of Hydra, they will chase them like mad dogs. Therefore, Baron Strucker dispatched his ace, Quicksilver. Whether it is investigation or combat, there is no doubt about Quicksilver's strength. No problems found. Quicksilver shook his head. The superheroes of the Avengers are making a big splash on TV, but there is no news at all in Sokovia. There are some clues about S.H.I.E.L.D., but they are not surprising. Lord Baron, you know that S.H.I.E.L.D.'s minions are everywhere. Maybe they passed by nearby because of other things. If they really came for Sokovia, there can't be just this little movement, let alone just 1 or 2 agents. I hope they will focus their attention so that we can show off our skills. As Kuayin spoke, he looked at the giant in the petri dish. Especially, see how terrifying this ultimate weapon is. Baron Strucker has mentioned to Quicksilver and Wanda more than once that as long as this ultimate weapon is created, then the so-called S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers will be just chickens and dogs that can be broken with a finger. Kuayin was also in a high mood at first, looking forward to this day. But this is the first time I say this, and I am full of expectations. The second time I said this, my expectations were still high. Then the third time, and then the fourth time. Do it all at once, second time tired, third time exhausted. No one can hold on to such a huge pie every day. Quicksilver is no longer interested in this so-called ultimate weapon, and even when he mentioned the latter, his tone seemed a bit yin and yang. Baron Strucker didn't care about Quicksilver's attitude. He sneered, "It's right to have doubts. When you truly see what he's capable of, all doubts will turn into 100% trust." Hearing this, Kuayin shrugged. Yes, the Baron is right. Kuayin has a head of loose silver-white hair and looks like a carefree young man. When he said this, he also looked casual and very informal. The woman standing next to him was much more taciturn. With the majesty and beautiful face in front of her, even if she remained silent, she could not conceal her dazzling brilliance. Wanda did not echo Quicksilver or Baron Strucker's words. She raised her head and looked at the petri dish, observing the ultimate weapon in the petri dish. At this moment, Wanda suddenly discovered the ultimate weapon in the petri dish, opened her eyes, and a pair of cold eyes looked at her through the space, as if they wanted to penetrate her whole body. The gaze was indifferent and cold, but it also carried a terrifying feeling that pierced people's hearts. After looking at each other, it made people shudder. Wanda couldn't help but staggered back 2 steps. When she raised her head again, she found that the ultimate weapon was still there. It was the same appearance as before. It seemed that Wanda's own hallucination when she opened her eyes just now. Is it really just an illusion? Wanda muttered in her heart, a little unsure. She is different from Quicksilver. Their abilities are in different directions. Wanda focuses more on the spiritual category. Whenever she gets close to the petri dish where the ultimate weapon is, there will be some abnormal reactions. It's like a warning. Therefore, Wanda stayed far away from the petri dish every time. But this time, the situation is obviously different. Baron Strucker did not notice the previous change. He turned back, looked at Wanda and said, "Wanda, come forward." Putting his hand on the glass wall of the petri dish, he tried hard to sense the fluctuations in the brain of the ultimate weapon. What had he been thinking about while he was sleeping? Hearing this, Wanda was stunned for a moment, and it was obvious that she extremely resisted this order. Her instinctive repulsion came close to the petri dish. But such words cannot be said to Baron Strucker, because it will make her appear very cowardly. Hydra never needs cowards. The cowards won't even be able to live as cannon fodder to the outside world, they will have been optimized internally. So, Wanda tried to make amends for herself. Lord Baron, the thickness of the glass wall of the petri dish is comparable to that of a titanium alloy steel plate, and its hardness is even worse. Lord Baron, you know that I must have close contact with the other person's brain in order to peek into the other person's heart, and even control the other party to a certain extent. I'm afraid there's nothing I can do through such a thick glass wall. Today's Wanda is not the Scarlet Witch of the future, and she has not yet mastered the energy of chaos. Today's Wanda is more interested in influencing the enemy's mind at close range and exerting mental control. She is not that powerful witch, but more like a junior mind control powerful person. The half-meter thick glass wall of the petri dish is confusing to anyone who looks at it. This is completely beyond the limit of Wanda's ability. As the base manager and Wanda's immediate superior, Baron Strucker was naturally aware of this capable general's abilities. He said softly, "I know this is beyond the limit of your ability, but, this time, it's different." Baron Strucker looked at the ultimate weapon in the petri dish and said quietly, "He has been exposed to gamma rays, yes, the same gamma rays that created the Hulk, and I am convinced that after being baptized by gamma rays, he is even better than the Hulk. But our Hydra does not need him to be just a Hulk. If we want to become the ultimate weapon, one Hulk is not enough." So, Wanda couldn't help but open her eyes. "Lord Baron, did you use the radiation experiment brought by that scepter on him?" In the Battle of New York, Asgard's evil god Loki led the Chitauri to invade the Earth, and were eventually repelled by the Avengers. At that time, Loki held a powerful scepter in his hand. No one knew this. The source of power of the thing is called the Mind Stone. Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. looked at the shape of the scepter and Loki as its owner, so they gave the latter the name, Loki's scepter. In the end, the insider after the operation, Loki's scepter fell into the hands of Baron Strucker. The Hydra laboratory conducted many experiments with this Loki scepter. Wanda and Quicksilver underwent the scepter experiment, and he is one of the few survivors of the experiment. From what Baron Strucker said, it seems that the ultimate weapon in the petri dish also passed the scepter experiment. That's right. If you can't even survive this experiment, how can it be called the ultimate weapon? Baron Strucker responded unabashedly. Then he looked at Wanda and continued. After going through the scepter experiment, the experimenter will have some deep connection to a certain extent. Just like you and Quicksilver, you can detect each other's thoughts to a certain extent. This is telepathy. Although there is a half-meter thick glass wall, I believe that with just this layer of petri dish, you can definitely observe the psychological activities of the ultimate weapon. Go ahead, Wanda, I believe in you. Baron Strucker said so, and Wanda couldn't refuse. She had no choice but to nod her head, and then slowly approached the giant petri dish. Baron Strucker looked at Wanda's back, his expression as still as a mountain. There was just a flash of anxiety in his eyes. He didn't let Wanda do this in the past because the ultimate weapon had been in a state of deep sleep. But recently, the activity of the ultimate weapon has suddenly intensified. Various signs indicate that the ultimate weapon is not far from waking up. At this time, Baron Strucker is eager to know what the ultimate weapon is thinking in his heart. According to normal biology, I have ordered my men to remove all the brain parts of the ultimate weapon and then implant mechanical components. He should have no thoughts of his own and be completely reduced to a weapon controlled by me, but strangely, various observation data show that the psychological activities of the ultimate weapon have been going on, and have become more active in recent times. This is obviously a sign to wake up. Baron Strucker couldn't figure it out. His brain had been removed and he didn't even have brain cells. Why did the ultimate weapon still have its own thinking ability? He couldn't figure it out. He couldn't figure it out no matter how hard he tried. This thing is so strange, beyond common sense. Perhaps, the ultimate weapon was designed to break common sense from the very beginning. On the verge of awakening, in order to prevent the situation from getting out of control, Baron Strucker sent Wanda, hoping that this capable general could find out what was going on inside the mind of the ultimate weapon. The Baron stared at Wanda's every move and never took his eyes away for a moment. He saw with his own eyes that Wanda put both hands on the petri dish, with her palms tightly pressed against the glass wall. Due to the difference in body size, Wanda's hands were separated by the glass wall, and the body part closest to the ultimate weapon was around the calf. Although it is not the best part of the brain, Wanda's ability can take effect as long as she is close to the other party, but there was no movement. Wanda said nothing during the whole process, and the ultimate weapon in the petri dish showed no response. After more than 10 minutes of this, Wanda breathed a sigh of relief and left the petri dish. She turned to look at Baron Strucker and shook her head. Lord Baron, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you. I didn't sense the psychological activity of the ultimate weapon. He was like a tombstone, cold and hard, without any feedback. Baron Strucker was a little unwilling to give up. He stared at Wanda and asked. Really, nothing discovered at all. He observed Wanda's every move throughout the process, trying to find any strange expression on Wanda. But Wanda was as normal as usual, without any panic or guilt. She responded bluntly, Yes, Lord Baron, but that's not to say that I haven't discovered anything at all. After my detailed induction, I am sure that the ultimate weapon will definitely wake up in as little as 10 days and as much as half a month. Great, I get it. After hearing Wanda's words and realizing that there was nothing gained at all, Baron Strucker's expression improved a lot. Knowing the exact time when the ultimate weapon wakes up would make things much easier. At the moment, the ultimate weapon is not finished yet. Baron Strucker was going to let her sleep for a while. He had already thought about how much anesthetic to inject. At the same time, Quicksilver also heard Wanda's words. When he heard this, his expression was filled with excitement. A shock. As little as 10 days, as much as half a month. Can we finally see the ultimate weapon in action? He couldn't wait any longer. But what Baron Strucker said next immediately made him furious. Not yet, it's not that time yet, I'm going to let the ultimate weapon sleep for a while longer. Baron Strucker said, and then looked at Wanda. Thank you for your hard work, Wanda, go have a good rest. Wanda nodded lightly, then gave Kuai-in a look, then turned around and walked out of the laboratory. She walked towards her room. Kuai-in followed him quickly and asked in a low voice. Did you really find nothing? I haven't seen Straker so nervous in a long time. There is definitely something wrong with that so-called ultimate weapon. Kuai-in looked carefree, but underneath his ungrateful appearance, he was observant of everything around him and had a keen insight into every detail. Wanda shook her head. Really found nothing. Wanda told the truth. She did not get in touch with the ladder at the ultimate weapon. If anything is discovered, the subtle changes in expressions cannot deceive Strack. After all, the latter is the manager of the Hydra base, and his ability there is no doubt that Wanda is 20 this year and is too immature in comparison. Being able to successfully pass the customs depends on telling the truth and not adulterating. She glanced at the monitor in the corner of the aisle and said softly. I went to the room and told him that there were too many surveillance devices outside. Kuiyin nodded and agreed. There are not many monitors inside the Hydra base, and all aspects are monitored. Of course, there are no monitors in Wanda and Kuiyin's personal rooms. After all, they are not prisoners. Their status in the base is not low, and they have high-level permissions on the Hydra Dark Network. They can be regarded as senior members of Hydra. Hydra is not in the private room of its own management. All have cameras installed. Basic privacy rights are still there. I suspect Strucker made a fatal mistake. He has been thinking about how to strengthen the ultimate weapon, but he has forgotten the most important thing, that is to hold the weapon firmly in his hands, otherwise he may hurt himself first, let alone deal with S.H.I.E.L.D. After returning to his personal room, Kuiyin couldn't wait to express his opinion. I have reason to suspect that this ultimate weapon is going out of control, and Straker can't control him. Wanda nodded slightly, agreeing with Quicksilver's point of view. She frowned and said in a deep voice. The inside of that ultimate weapon was in chaos, extremely chaotic. I can't tell you what the specific situation is. After all, this is the first time for close-range sensing. But I'm sure that he has more than just one or two abilities. The gamma rays that created the Hulk. I'm afraid it's just one of them. Snap, snap, snap. Short but crisp applause came from the corner, and at the same time, another sentence reached the ears of the two people. Wonderful judgment. Who is it? Who is hiding there? Quicksilver took a step forward and protected Wanda behind him. His expression was serious and his voice was extremely cold. This is a private room, even if you're a member of Hydra. I also have the right to shoot you. Quicksilver was a little scared. This guy hiding in the corner was obviously extraordinary. It wasn't until he took the initiative to speak that the two of them discovered the latter. What if he was harboring evil intentions? Especially this room is Wanda's personal room. Quicksilver's room is across from the corridor. If Quicksilver hadn't come with him this time, Wanda would have faced this guy alone, very dangerous. Wanda is in danger. In such a short time, do you no longer recognize me? The man walked out of the darkness in the corner and sat down on the sofa very calmly. He showed no concern for Kuiyin, who was nervous and might take action at any time. Such an indifferent attitude made Kuiyin angry, and fear. Such a short time. Have we met before? Kuiyin looked at the other person and found that this man had an Asian yellow face. From this angle, he was also very handsome and good-looking. If he had seen him before, with this skin color and appearance, Kuiyin must have been impressed by it. But right now, although there was a sense of familiarity, Quicksilver really had no impression. Quicksilver didn't recognize it, but Wanda did. After all, he is a person with spiritual ability. Sometimes, he only needs to feel to determine the other party's identity, and he can conclude that they are inseparable. Who are you? The ultimate weapon, Wanda exclaimed, with obvious surprise. But how is this possible? You should still be sleeping in that huge petri dish. How could you appear in front of us? When Kuiyin heard this, his hostility became more intense. Kuiyin usually doesn't pay attention to fair duels when dealing with such an enemy who pretends to be a ghost. He is ready to call someone. This is the Hydra base after all. You are taking a good look. But the other party ignored Kuiyin and said something to Wanda. Wanda did as she was told. After careful observation, she immediately discovered something was wrong. The man in front of her looked like a real person, but as she looked closer after observation, we found that the latter was obviously illusory and floating, and its realism was sharply reduced. This is not a real body, it is an illusion. Wanda spoke softly, and suddenly thought of something. Was this ability to create illusions and communicate remotely obtained through the scepter experiment? The man opposite was noncommittal. I have many abilities, but the ability to create illusions outside my body does come from that scepter. Your guess is correct. He had no intention of hiding this matter from Wanda, but told the truth. This explanation was extremely credible. Wanda and Quicksilver looked at each other with complicated expressions. Wanda sighed with emotion. The name of the scepter is Loki's scepter, and it is a scepter belonging to the gods. With such magical abilities, it can only be said to be worthy of the gods. Asgard is exactly the same as the gods in Nordic mythology. In human perception, it is naturally a real god. But the man opposite heard this and sneered. Don't think so highly of those Asgardians. The so-called gods are just life forms that are more powerful than ordinary humans. Seriously speaking, the vast majority of Asgardians are not as good as you brothers and sisters. You have great potential, but you have not tapped it yet. Do you expect Hydra to help you develop your potential and improve your combat power? Then they have to consider your loyalty. He smiled very disdainfully. The loyalty you are showing to Hydra now matches your strength. But if you become stronger, you will experience what it means to be unable to control your own freedom in life and death. He seemed to know Kuayin and Wanda very well. The words he said were also very sensitive. Kuayin's expression changed. He protected Wanda behind him, and said coldly, "We are loyal to Hydra. If you want to provoke our loyalty to Hydra, that is wishful thinking. Long live Hydra." But the other party didn't talk much with Kuayin. "Okay, you don't need to pretend to be a loyal minister in front of me. I am here to cooperate with you sincerely, and I am not saying these hypocritical words." After leaving these words to Kuayin, he ignored Kuayin and looked straight at Wanda, who was standing behind Kuayin, as if waiting for the response of this very weak-looking girl. See, at this scene, Kuayin's expression changed. In the eyes of others, it was him, the older brother, who made the decision for both of them. Under normal circumstances, this was indeed the case. But what others didn't know was that when Wanda made a decision, when the decision was made, Quicksilver supported the latter 100%. So on the surface, Quicksilver was the one who made the decision, but in fact, it was his sister Wanda who had always made the decision. This ultimate weapon, obviously it was the first time they met, and there was no acquaintance in the past. But do you know the two of them so well? What did Kuayin want to say? But Wanda had already taken a step forward, turned around and glanced at Kuayin, and then faced him head-on, staring at the ultimate weapon. "My name is Wanda, code name Witch. This is my brother Pietro, codenamed Quicksilver. You seem to know us brother and sister very well, but we know nothing about you. The ultimate weapon is the only thing we know about you." This is the formal self-introduction of both parties. At this moment, the man's expression became serious and solemn. "The ultimate weapon. That was the code name the people in the laboratory gave me after I was sent to the laboratory. My real name is Rorschach, the uncompromising Rorschach. Those guys thought that by cutting off my brain, they could control me as a robot and achieve their goals. But judging from the final result, their idea was completely wrong. Thanks to them, after becoming the ultimate weapon, I can still think normally and have my own logical thinking ability even if I don't have brain cells." Said the ultimate weapon. Rorschach looked at Wanda and Quicksilver. "So, I found you two. Because in this huge Hydra base, only you two can cooperate with me. As for the others, when I woke up, this Hydra base was the first to honor the flag." These words, Rorschach said with murderous intent. Wanda is proficient in mind, and has a very keen sense of these emotional changes. She is very sure that Rorschach is not lying. His current the murderous intention is really very serious. It's just that, in the Hydra base, facing the two senior cadres of Hydra, is it a bit too BT to say such words? Aren't you afraid that we will report you now? Do not forget, your body is still bound in that huge petri dish. As long as things go wrong, you will no longer be the ultimate weapon, but a time bomb. By then, you'll be finished." Kuayin couldn't help but uttered something at this time. Luo Sha couldn't help laughing when he heard this. "You won't do this," he said seriously. "I have been secretly observing you for a while, and I am very sure that you will not do this. You have no loyalty to Hydra, and joining Hydra is just for revenge. But I want to tell you, Hydra cannot help you get revenge. Only I can help you avenge your hatred." Then, Rorschach said slowly and logically, "Of course, these are just superficial factors. They are my trust in you. And the most fundamental reason is, even if you report me, I will not be afraid at all. Because I can wake up now, turn this base into a river of blood, and let you see how the ultimate weapon can show its power, how earth-shaking it will be." The words of the ultimate weapon Rorschach can be said to be both confident and domineering. He trusted Wanda and Quicksilver. "Therefore, we are willing to meet candidly and sincerely discuss cooperation matters. But it doesn't matter if you take a wrong look. Just turning over the table was just exposing him to the world in advance. He could afford this price. If you have strength, you can do whatever you want. Kuai-yin was shocked by this momentum, and originally wanted to say one or two inappropriate words. But seeing this scene, I suppressed the words in my heart, and didn't dare to be a casual thorn. He looked at Wanda, and the subtext was to leave all the control over the matter to Wanda. If, Rorschach, everything you said is true, so thank you for your recognition. In such a large Hydra base, only the two of them have received Rorschach's approval and hope to reach a cooperative relationship. This can be said to be very face-saving. Wanda took a step forward and stood in front of Quicksilver. She looked towards the ultimate weapon, which he didn't understand and was even more unfamiliar with, thought over and over again and gave a rejection answer. However, our goals are not aligned and we may not be able to cooperate. Wanda said seriously. The first thing you do after waking up is to destroy this Hydra base and bring it as a sacrifice flag. For you, this is a matter of course. After all, it was Hydra that turned you into this. But we have no grudge against Hydra. Our enemy is someone else. When Luo Sha heard this, a smile appeared on his face. Wanda's rejection made him think more highly of the latter. After all, most of his understanding of Wanda came from the film and television materials he watched before traveling. For Wanda, he had no understanding of Da Zhenren. At this moment, it was the first official meeting between him and Wanda. Rorschach stood up, his figure already a little unreal, and it seemed that the ability given by Loki's scepter could not support it. He created the illusion for such a long time. He said in a deep voice. Is that so? I'm afraid not. I know who you want revenge on. Who covets Sokovia's oil resources and other mineral resources and subverts the country's regime. Who started the proxy war in Sokovia, causing constant wars and no peace. Rorschach looked at Wanda and then at Quicksilver with a serious expression. Whose warlords were fighting in a melee, and a shell fell into your home, causing the two of your parents to die young. When he mentioned this, Kuai-yin's eyes suddenly turned red and he was a little anxious. Wanda's face also changed slightly and became much colder. But Rorschach did not stop talking, but continued. You know who is behind this, and so do I. America. Who else could it be but him? You joined Hydra just to avenge America and seek revenge. Oh, don't be wishful thinking. If Hydra had the ability, it would have done it long ago. How could it be your turn today? Hydra can't do it, even if you are included, it still can't be done. But I can. Wanda's face didn't look good, and she responded in a low voice. I know that even if I join Hydra, my chances of getting revenge on America are slim, but this is the most promising option. If I don't believe in Hydra, should I believe you? Although you are the ultimate weapon, you are only one person, and you have a grudge against Hydra. Luo Sha replied, revenge when there is a grudge, repay a grudge when there is a grudge, repay debts, kill for life, these are the simplest principles in the world. It is natural for me to take revenge on Hydra, but who said that America and I have no grudges? Already. America is also responsible for why I am what I am today. No, that's not right. America took 70% of the work, and Hydra only took 30%. Kuai-yin was stunned when he heard this turn of events. Do you also have a grudge against America? And also a deep hatred? Luo Sha nodded heavily. Everything I said is true, not a single lie. Quick-yin was a little unsure and looked at Wanda quietly, and Wanda gave an affirmative look in return. Rorschach didn't tell lies. No matter it was his tone or expression, the murderous aura of someone who wanted to stab someone was not concealed at all. This Hydra's ultimate weapon does have a grudge against America, and it's not just an ordinary grudge. When it comes to that country, it's much more hateful than when it comes to bringing the Hydra base to sacrifice the flag. This thing cannot be fake at all, especially in front of Wanda, the witch. I see. Rorschach, we have a common enemy. I agree to the cooperation you mentioned. Wanda did not ask further what grudges Rorschach and America had. That must be the deepest secret in Rorschach's heart. She deliberately let Rorschach tell it. Faced with such bloody reality, Wanda did not intend to do so. Do it. She just needs to make sure that what Rorschach said is true and not to deceive her and Quicksilver, that's enough. Rorschach glanced at Wanda and just smiled without saying anything. In fact, the current chaotic situation in Sokovia is not due to America's family. Rorschach didn't believe that Hydra had no role in this. But right now, he has no evidence, and secondly, he has exposed too many secrets to Wanda and Quicksilver. If he makes such a violent comment, it may arouse some adverse reactions. After all, although Wanda and Quicksilver don't have much loyalty to Hydra, they do have some feelings for it. So Rorschach didn't say anything about this. Needless to say, neither Wanda nor Quicksilver are fools. As long as you experience more things and gradually see the true face of Hydra, you will naturally figure out many things. Single quote. What you want to understand is always more reliable and unshakable than the truth told by others. Your body is still sleeping in a petri dish. You can't do anything by relying only on illusions and no physical existence. Now that we have reached a cooperative relationship, what do you need us to do? Wanda asked. Of course, things need to be done to achieve cooperation. Rorschach is definitely unable to do anything with his appearance, so naturally the two of them need to take action. Although they have just reached a cooperative relationship, but Wanda has naturally entered the work process. And Rorschach really believes in Wanda. Say whatever you want. If you dare to believe it, I will answer it. I hope you will do one and only one thing: keep an eye on Loki's scepter. That scepter is unceremoniously the most precious item in this base, and it will be indispensable for many future plans. Quicksilver moved his lips, obviously wanting to say something, but he was worried and finally chose to remain silent. Rorschach glanced at him and explained. I know what you want to ask in your heart. You want to ask me, since I can wake up at any time, why don't I wake up immediately, break free from the restraints, and directly seize the scepter in my hand? The reason is simple. Every hour I sleep, I become stronger than I was an hour ago. Do you know how much resources Strack invested in me? Comparable to the electricity consumption used by a country, the terrifying magnetic field kinetic energy. This Hydra base has power supply shortages from time to time. Do you think it's a power supply shortage? No, this was actually Straker injecting all this electrical energy into my body. Quicksilver opened his eyes wide in shock. He never thought that the source of the power outage problem that he complained about from time to time actually came from Rorschach. When Rorschach said these things, he lost his previous domineering attitude. Instead, he told the truth and explained seriously. But no matter how simple these words are, they are still shocking. Moreover, even if I wanted to sleep for a longer period of time and accumulate more energy, I couldn't do it. Rorschach spoke quietly at this time and sighed with deep meaning. Quicksilver was indeed a good helper and asked immediately. Why is that? What happened? Rorschach looked at Quicksilver and Wanda and said in a deep voice. I heard everything you said to Straker in front of the petri dish. Quicksilver, do you think the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. are still very angry because they didn't discover this base? Maybe you think those S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are incompetent. But what I want to tell you is, you were fooled. Rorschach sneered at the corner of his mouth. S.H.I.E.L.D. has been riddled with holes by Hydra and can now be called Serpentine S.H.I.E.L.D. It is not difficult to explain that S.H.I.E.L.D. did not notice the movement in Sokovia. There are not a few Hydras who have infiltrated the top management of S.H.I.E.L.D. But this only includes S.H.I.E.L.D., the Avengers is a place that Hydra cannot penetrate at any cost. Coupled with the disappearance of Loki's scepter, the two crown princes of Asgard have lost a lot of face. They will not let go of any details. Wanda heard this and shook her head gently. The 6 Avengers, their abilities are very strong. But no matter how strong they are, there are only 6 of them. To really put it into practice, it still has to be done by the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. The implication is that when things are left to S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, the truth will not be grasped by the Avengers. After all, S.H.I.E.L.D. is not riddled with holes that have been infiltrated by Hydra. Did you? Rorschach laughed when he heard this. Not always. Iron Man in the Avengers created an artificial intelligence, an intelligent mechanical life form named Jarvis. Jarvis alone is better than thousands of armies. Found it, sir. Tony Stark, who was leisurely drinking afternoon tea, sat up from the beach chair. He received an urgent report from Jarvis. Sir, after detailed comparison of large-scale data and information discrepancies, I am basically sure where Loki's scepter has wandered. There are no errors in the database and there are no errors in the data model. It is basically certain that it is a secret base belonging to Hydra. Finally found. Tony Stark regained his composure and wanted to put on his steel suit and go to investigate the situation. But Jarvis once again gave his advice. Sir, according to the data model inference, there is a 94% probability that we have caught a big fish this time. The hidden Hydra base consumes a huge amount of resources every month, especially the extremely terrifying electricity, as well as various other rare resources. I have no doubt that under the Hydra base has been transformed into a military factory, and a large number of weapons are manufactured every day. Sir, that base has received so much resources and the corresponding security authority is extremely high. Sir, it is very dangerous for you to take the initiative to inquire about information, and you will alert others. Whether it's dangerous or not, it won't scare Tony Stark. With the technological suit he built himself, Tony Stark believes that he has opened up a technological gap with his opponent, which is enough to protect his own safety. With this confidence, Tony is still yes. But after hearing the second half of Jarvis's words, he immediately stopped. You're right, Jarvis. It's hard to find a big fish, but if he slips away, it will really raise your blood pressure. Will Loki's scepter also be in this base? Jarvis could not give a definite answer. Sir, that's not certain. It can only be calculated based on the data model. After the disappearance of Loki's scepter, all the clues obtained after tracing it are vaguely pointing to this base. In the current deduction sandbox, there is a 70% probability that it is still here, in a base. But as time goes by, the probability of this possibility is getting lower and lower. The faint pointing does not mean that it is definitely there. It may have been secretly transferred at some time. Jarvis can build a data model based on external intelligence, but most of the intelligence entering Hydra is like a mud cow entering the sea, no longer exists. Once intelligence is involved with Hydra, it will be discontinued. Standing there and thinking for a moment, Tony Stark ordered. Jarvis, put me in touch with some other old friends from the Avengers. If I go alone, I may not be able to alert the enemy, but if we all go out together, that is to go all out. Jarvis happily said yes. Then he confirmed, Sir, do you need me to transfer relevant information to S.H.I.E.L.D.? If we can get support from S.H.I.E.L.D., we will really have a big fight and there will be no room for mercy. No, don't notify S.H.I.E.L.D. Until the moment before we took action, we informed Nick Fury of this matter. Tony Stark rejected this proposal without hesitation. He snorted. It's not that I don't believe in Nick Fury, it's that I don't believe in today's S.H.I.E.L.D. After the battle in New York, Loki's scepter was ultimately handed over to S.H.I.E.L.D. for safekeeping. What was the result? Gone. There must be a mole within S.H.I.E.L.D., and the authority is not low. Jarvis, as you just reminded, this is a big fish, there is no room for error, and I don't want any surprises. Jarvis replied mechanically. Yes, sir, I understand. Then he paused for a while and then said again. Sir, I have already communicated with your Avengers comrades. It is expected that everything will be here in 2 days. Mr. Hawkeye, Ms. Natasha can come to your villa today. Captain Steve and Dr. Banner will be a little later, but they can also come quickly. Only Mr. Thor will come slower. He seemed to be entangled in something. Well, it seemed to be some personal matter. Tony raised his eyebrows. Private matter. Is his girlfriend finally dumping him? No matter. Since it's a private matter, just pretend you don't know. Will everyone be here in 2 days? Very good. Including the time spent traveling and repairing, the Avengers will be able to defeat the Hydra base in 3 days. Sokovia, Hydra's secret base. Rorschach's visions have faded with the wind over time. After confirming that he no longer existed, Kuayan's expression changed and he became extremely solemn. Wanda, do you believe what he said? Do you think, is everything he said true? Quicksilver was extremely uncertain about the olive branch handed over by Rorschach. After all, it was the first time they met. The identity of the other party was the ultimate weapon that Baron Strucker had cultivated for many years, and he listened to Rorschach. After waking up, the first thing he did after waking up was to sacrifice the flag of the Hydra base under his feet. All this was too abrupt and out of touch, and it was hard for Quicksilver to believe the latter. After all, unlike Wanda, she has made great achievements in spiritual telepathy. Then it depends on what you have in mind, Wanda said in a deep voice. Follow Hydra. Is it really possible to take revenge on that behemoth? Quicksilver fell silent immediately. He had an idea of whether Hydra had this ability. If he really had this ability, he would have done it a long time ago. Why would there be any need to huddle in the sewer and be a rat? Wanda said again. Obviously, you have an answer in mind. Hydra can't do this. But this Rorschach, this ultimate weapon, has given us a hope. Even if it is a weak hope, I must seize it. Kuai-yin couldn't help but asked. Wanda, how do you know that this Rorschach is not talking nonsense? Wanda said seriously. It depends on Baron Strucker. He often brags about this ultimate weapon. As long as what Baron Strucker said is true, then what Rorschach said must also be true. When Quicksilver heard this, he suddenly felt his throat was a little choked. He wanted to ask now, does Baron Strucker know everything? Then does he know that after the ultimate weapon he created wakes up, the first thing he does is to take it? Did he sacrifice the flag? Does Baron Strucker know about this? Probably don't know. Even if you know, it doesn't matter, because he has created the pinnacle masterpiece of his life. In this life, a person may be heavier than Mount Tai or as light as a feather. But when it comes to me, from the moment I build this ultimate weapon, my life has reached its peak. Baron Strucker stood in front of the giant petri dish, watching his clerks pour buckets of anesthetic liquid into the petri dish, and he felt a great sense of satisfaction in his heart. Lord Baron, you can't be happy so early. The ultimate weapon is at risk of losing control. Only by holding the ultimate weapon firmly in your hands can your life truly reach its peak. A bald scientist in white came to Baron Straker and whispered a reminder. He is the chief scientist under Straker, and he is the one who is really in charge of conducting experiments on the ultimate weapon. So, he knew better than anyone else that if the ultimate weapon was out of control, others might still have a way to survive, but he would never have a chance to survive. Baron Strucker interrupted the chief and corrected. No, 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 if I can truly hold this weapon, then my life will be completely complete. But is there anything truly perfect in this world? And at this time, from the moment I built this ultimate weapon, I was already at the pinnacle of my life. Baron Strucker said somewhat crazily. Even if the ultimate weapon finally goes out of control and the ultimate killing begins all over the world, by then, all human civilization will remember my name. Straker. Baron Strucker. It was I who created this killing weapon. Straker has gone crazy. He is a madman. Single quote. The chief looked at Straker's crazy performance and cursed in his heart. He still didn't dare to have any objections. After all, Baron Strucker was the person in charge of this base. With just one word, he could be thrown into a petri dish to feed the monsters. All the chief scientist could do at this time was to secretly order his researchers behind Strax back to add larger doses of anesthetics and sleeping fluids to the petri dishes. Strucker was already crazy in his eyes. In order to complete his masterpiece, he has put his own life and death out of the question. In order to make himself famous in the world, he would not hesitate to be infamous for eternity. The chief scientist asked himself that he could not do this. He was already thinking in his mind about how to find a way out. The Hydra base under Strax command is already a powder keg. Just waiting for a spark to fly in one day, and with a boom, everything will explode into the sky. Lord Baron. When Straker and the chief scientist were having different thoughts, a clear voice came into their ears. The chief was obviously startled and was obviously thinking about something bad. But Straker was calm. Turn around. Oh, is it Wanda? What's matter? I don't remember what task I gave you. His expression has returned to calmness, and there is no trace of the madness before. Wanda didn't see any details, so she followed the steps of her previous plan and implemented them one by one. That's it, Lord Baron, I had close contact with the ultimate weapon before, but I didn't notice his psychological activities. After I went back and thought about it carefully, I felt that maybe it was still strange. I want to touch Loki's scepter. The only connection between me and the ultimate weapon is the scepter of the gods. Perhaps, after coming into contact with Loki's scepter, I will have some understanding and take this opportunity to connect with the ultimate weapon. Wanda gave her own explanation. She wanted to confirm the location of Loki's scepter. Of course, the reason must be more high-sounding. So she used what happened before as an excuse. No, Loki's scepter is very valuable. The chief was the first one to jump out and refused to agree. Wanda looked a little disappointed when she heard this. But in fact, her goal has been achieved. Where Loki's scepter is very important, but more importantly, it is necessary to confirm that Loki the scepter is still in this base, which is even more important. Therefore, Wanda's expression on her face was a little disappointed and downcast, and she was ready to say goodbye. But she was a little happy in her heart. The only task Rorschach had given her, there is no room for error. However, at this time, an accident occurred. Go ahead and go to room B7 on the 3rd underground floor. Loki's scepter is placed there. I have given you permission and you can stay there for 1 hour. Baron Strucker looked at Wanda, but made a decision that surprised everyone. He continued, go ahead. When you come back, use your ability near the petri dish and sense it carefully. I really want to know, what is the ultimate weapon thinking about now? Are you like an ignorant child, ignorant of everything? Still, with a fire burning in your heart, trying to kill us all? Listening to Baron Strucker's words, Wanda couldn't help but feel a little faint in her heart. She has already reached a cooperative relationship with Rorschach early on. Did Strack discover this? Did he discover that Wanda actually had something to hide? As you command, my Lord Baron. Wanda suppressed these uneasy emotions and lowered her head at the right time, showing a very submissive look. Then she kept her head lowered throughout the whole process, turned around slowly, and left the central laboratory with as slow a pace as possible. She avoided looking at Baron Strucker, so that Strucker could not see her expression clearly. But similarly, she did not see the change in Baron Strucker's facial expression. Lord Baron, should we? The chief approached Straker and asked in a low voice. He didn't see anything unusual about Wanda, but subconsciously wanted to increase security measures and monitoring methods. Loki's scepter is important. Since falling into their hands, Hydra has not completely decrypted the scepter. Therefore, it is reasonable to pay more attention to this scepter and add a series of security measures. No, the twin stars Quicksilver and Wanda, their power comes from our Hydra experiments, and their loyalty to Hydra is guaranteed. But Straker rejected the chief's proposal. His eyes fell on Wanda's back, his eyes were very deep. Too much monitoring will make Gemini unhappy and make them think that I don't trust them. Gemini is my right-hand man, and I don't want them to get emotional, do you understand? The chief was stunned for a moment, and he said to himself that he has never seen you, Lord Baron, so easy to talk to before. He mumbled a little in his heart, but he did not dare to have any opinions. What the Baron is saying is, I will definitely never say this again in the future. Wanda walked smoothly towards the room Baron Strucker mentioned. She was in the blind corner of the surveillance area and asked as thinly as a mosquito wire. Has Strucker already noticed? His attitude. It's different from the past. When something goes wrong, there must be a monster. Rorschach's vision has not yet materialized, but the voice has reached Wanda's ears through the spiritual link. Ignore him. Even if he discovers something, it's already too late. If he turns his back, I will flip the table immediately. So you and Quicksilver don't need to worry about safety. The top priority is to determine the location of Loki's scepter. Moreover, he should be in a state of self-narcissism and self-satisfaction now. That is a very complicated emotional change that has nothing to do with us. Listening to Rorschach's words, Wanda felt a lot more at ease. She couldn't help but whisper. I feel your voice is much clearer. It's like it's right in front of you. Rorschach explained. The distance between us cannot be explained by physical rules. The illusion I created has an activity range of about 1,000 meters. Within this distance, the communication between you and me will be smooth and there will be no lag phenomenon. Right now, don't look at the distance between you and me, which is separated by many walls, but in fact, the straight line distance between you and me is only about 400 meters, which is still within our capabilities. These superpowers cannot be explained by the common sense of physics in the past. Maybe some can be explained, but most of them cannot be explained at all. Wanda seemed to understand, and finally nodded, indicating that she understood the truth. On the 3rd underground floor, room B7 is an archive room that looks ordinary from the outside. With Wanda's previous permissions, naturally she cannot enter the archive room to view various files at will. But now with Baron Strucker's temporary promotion, she was able to open this secret room with her own voice and iris authentication. When I went in, I found that there were a lot of crystals arranged in this secret room. When Rorschach saw these things, he suddenly realized. No wonder I can't sense the location of Loki's scepter. These crystals have the effect of isolating the wave band, which is equivalent to completely isolating the aura fluctuations of Loki's scepter. As a new human, who has gained abilities from Loki's scepter, Rorschach can sense Loki's scepter at close range. To be precise, he can sense the Mind Stone. But he had no ability to do so before. Induction. This made Rorschach suspect that the Mind Stone had been secretly transferred. At this moment, looking at the isolation crystals in the room, Rorschach understood the reason why his induction failed. At the same time, he became more certain that the Mind Stone must be in the room. In the room. Wanda did not hesitate and walked in. When she reached the deepest part of the secret room, she saw Loki's scepter leaning on a glass platform. The appearance of Loki's scepter was simple and old, like the previous one. It is an antique of the era. But the overall shape has a unique charm, which is matched with it. Especially the large gem on the top of the scepter has a unique charm and is extremely eye-catching. Don't look at other parts of the scepter. Just stare at the yellow gem at the top of the scepter, that's enough. All the essence of Loki's scepter is in that gem, that is the real core. Rorschach's voice sounded in Wanda's ears, causing Wanda to focus on the mind gem at the top. However, from Wanda's perspective, she did not notice the handle of the scepter and the gem at the top. Is there any essential difference? It can only be said that the people who assembled the scepter in the later period were very skilled, and it is impossible to find any contradictions. There is a glass cover above Loki's scepter, and Wanda is not polite. Directly she opened the cage and held Loki's scepter with her upper hand. She had told Strucker before that she wanted to get close to the scepter again. Since she had received permission, there was no reason to give in halfway. This time she touched it with her upper hand. Get up, let alone, Wanda really feels like she has become a little different. Loki's scepter also has a great amplifying effect on her. If she was just a fledgling mental ability user before, then. At this moment, she officially took a solid step towards the Scarlet Witch. The crimson chaotic energy quietly emerged, rendering Wanda a crimson halo. Rorschach, who was observing secretly, raised his eyebrows slightly. He did not expect that. Loki's scepter has improved Wanda's strength so obviously. This is consistent with common sense. Loki's scepter is a strategic treasure, and it is definitely impossible for Wanda to wear it for a long time and use it as a portable magic weapon. Of course, it just doesn't work here with Hydra. When it comes to me, how can I improve my strength? How can I do it? Luo Sha muttered in her heart. I just don't know. After the soul gem at the top of the scepter is dug out, will the remaining scepter itself still have any effect? There should be, right? Being able to assemble it with the Mind Stone is not a bargain after all. It is definitely impossible for Wanda to use the Mind Stone. This thing has too much significance. Holding it is like holding a large mocking bait. Everything from purple sweet potatoes to family planning offices will come to you. Rorschach must have carried the Mind Stone with him, and the remaining parts of Loki's scepter, with a little assembly, should be able to be used as a staff, right? Still nothing found. After Wanda turned back, Baron Straker asked her to get close to the petri dish again and feel it. However, seeing Wanda's delay in responding, Straker's expression became even more tense. After all, it was due to it as normal for executives born from snakes to kill people if they disagree. Of course, such great malice will definitely not be revealed to Wanda. In the case of Wanda and Quicksilver, the precious twin stars with immediate combat power in front of him, Straker has always been very tolerant. Wanda closed her eyes and concentrated, her right hand pressed against the huge glass wall. It seemed that she was concentrating on the ultimate weapon in the induction petri dish. But in fact, she was secretly communicating with Rorschach. Without revealing some real information, I'm afraid it will be difficult to get through Straker's test. His current mental state is a little abnormal, and he looks a little crazy. Wanda asked softly, also asking Rorschach for instructions on how to deal with it. Rorschach had nothing to be afraid of and said bluntly, "Tell the truth. Tell Strack what you feel. It only lasts a few days. Even if something unexpected happens, there will be no time to turn around." Wanda knew what Rorschach meant by these days. That was the subtext of the Avengers attack. Although Quicksilver didn't find any clues, after witnessing Rorschach's extraordinary abilities finally, she chose to believe Rorschach. Okay, listen to you, she responded in her heart. Then she left the giant petri dish with a relieved expression on her face, showing some difficulty. After taking a long breath, she came to Straker and said in a solemn tone, "Road. Lord Baron, fire." I saw a strong flame. Struck was a little confused. "Flame? What flame?" Wanda explained. "Lord Baron, I feel the hot and unbearable flame in the body of the ultimate weapon. It is anger, resentment, and many kinds of negative emotions entangled together, burning like a fire. Lord Baron, I believe your evaluation of the ultimate weapon. Such hot and terrifying anger rises. I can't imagine how many lives it will take to restrain it." Wanda couldn't hide the shock in her words. She was really shocked, because the blazing anger in her heart was the real emotional fluctuation she felt in the ultimate weapon. It was obvious that Luo Sha still seemed to be communicating with her secretly. Very rational, but there is such terrifying anger deep inside. Ordinary people are extremely angry and stay extremely angry for a whole day. Then the ultimate weapon is used in extremely angry situations. What will be done? Wanda couldn't imagine it. He was obviously so angry in his heart, but when he came to discuss cooperation with her and Kuayin, he still remained rational and could even give an explanation. The ultimate weapon. Rorschach, how much have you endured? When you decide to release it all, how many more are you prepared to destroy? However, the change in Baron Strucker's expression was totally different from Wanda's. After hearing Wanda's words, his expression became more excited, and his eyes became more excited. Angry beyond measure. Okay, great. It would be terrible if there was no emotion of anger. Seeing the shock and confusion on Wanda's face, Straker explained a few words softly. The ultimate weapon I created has once withstood gamma-ray irradiation experiments. And gamma rays are the culprit that created the Hulk. According to our Hydra experts' long-term follow-up research, the Hulk's true combat power has always been a mystery. Sometimes it is so strong that it cannot be restrained, and sometimes it just feels very strong, but it can still be defeated. And the variable in this is anger. This is a very strange variable factor. When the Hulk becomes angrier, he becomes more powerful, and even his size will increase to a certain extent. Therefore, to judge how strong the Hulk is, you can judge from his size. 1 or 2 judgments. Then, Strack looked at Rorschach in the petri dish and expressed proudly. And the ultimate weapon I created with my own hands undoubtedly possesses this quality perfectly. Moreover, he is more powerful and perfect than the Hulk. Wanda nodded as if she understood something. At this time, she suddenly remembered something. The Hulk is usually only 3 or 4 meters tall, but even so, it is extremely powerful and can easily conquer strongholds. The single-person destruction of the tank position was even more difficult. And what about Rorschach? Wanda suddenly turned her head and looked at the huge body rising and falling with the nutrient solution in the giant petri dish. Even if she was curled up, at a glance, he was at least 5 meters tall. He was still curled up. Looking at this scene, Wanda was silent. She glanced at Baron Strucker from the corner of her eye. The manager of the Hydra base, her expression was a little excited, and she couldn't hide her madness. This time Wanda believed it. Her nominal boss had really created an amazing existence. Chapter 11. I thought the day would pass peacefully like this. Neither the Avengers nor S.H.I.E.L.D. have been heard. After Wanda determined the specific location of Loki's scepter, she and Quicksilver locked the secret room firmly. As for what Baron Strucker and his subordinates in the laboratory were secretly preparing to do, Wanda followed Rorschach's arrangements and did not focus on the past. This is also to avoid arousing the vigilance of Strack and others. There are not many others in this Hydra base, but there are quite a few people who are extremely cautious in every move they make. I thought days like this would continue for a while. The result was just 3 days later. The alarm has sounded. Wanda and Quicksilver received the message immediately, packed their clothes as quickly as possible, and arrived at the command hall inside the base. Inside the command room, there is a video recording device connected to the outside world, which transmits scenes of what happened outside the base into the base. Because of this, watching the superhumans flying around on the screen, killing each other, everyone instantly understood the truth behind the alarm: the Avengers coming to kill. The Avengers, offensive was far more swift and effective than expected. Highlight 1 quickly and accurately. The external protection system deployed by Hydra was uprooted and completely destroyed by the Avengers in just a few rounds. Bunkers, towers, and even moving artillery and tanks pose no threat to the Avengers. Wanda saw a scene on the big screen with her own eyes. A tank of more than 10 tons was thrown by a green giant holding the barrel of the gun with both hands. It was like a lead ball falling to the ground, directly in the snow of Sokovia. A deep hole was dug in the ground. Then there was a gorgeous explosion, and the damaged tank and the driver inside were killed in the bright explosion fireworks. Of course, Hydra's external protection system is not in vain. Although the Avengers looked fair-faced, neatly dressed, and unscathed. But at least some of Iron Man's shells were consumed and some of Hawkeye's arrows were consumed, which can be called a gain. According to the battle situation on the front line, all members of the Avengers have appeared on the battlefield. With Thor, Hulk and Captain Steve as the main force, Iron Man Tony Stark supports them in the sky. Hawkeye and Black Widow have not yet determined their whereabouts, and they have maintained a certain degree of concealment. The battle situation on the front line was quickly reported. As expected, the report sounded like Hawkeye and Black Widow were just trying to get along. But in fact, the original 6-person group each performed its own duties, and each had its own shortcomings. Everyone present is a Hydra elite. But looking at these 6 superheroes killing people outside the base, they can't help but feel numb. No matter how elite they are still just humans. Can these 6 be considered human beings? Baron Strucker walked into the command room calmly, with a calm look on his face. He had already received the report from the front line, and he was acting unhurriedly at this time, which really put him at ease. Human heart. Even if a subordinate suggested, "Lord Baron, I suggest dispatching the Geminis. The Avengers are already non-human extraordinary individuals. It is too difficult for our soldiers to fight against them. Only Gemini has enough strength to confront them and even suppress them. It's not that only the Avengers have superhumans. We, Hydra, also have our own superheroes." When Wanda heard this, she stood calmly and said nothing. But Quicksilver raised his eyebrows when he heard this, immediately gearing up and getting excited. How to defeat the Avengers is an almost impossible topic, extremely difficult, and almost impossible to achieve. But Quicksilver is confident that while these enemies are not familiar with his abilities, he can attack them severely. Teaching this group of Avengers a lesson can even cause a major blow to their numbers. No matter what happens, with Kuayan's ability, he can return safely. Quicksilver looked at Baron Strucker, waiting for the latter's order to act. It can be seen that he is a little eager to try. There have been too many big cakes drawn inside Hydra, and now no matter what, I have to take a few bites to get a taste of what it's like. But Baron Strucker had no intention of dispatching the Geminis. He looked at everyone in the command room and said decisively, "No, Gemini is still guarding the base. Even if the twin stars are deployed, 2 against 6 will not be able to gain an advantage. I have a more perfect decision, a decision that can truly annihilate all the Avengers." Struck slammed the table and ordered loudly, "I decided to dispatch the ultimate weapon." Suddenly the lab chief's expression changed. "Lord Baron, the risk of deploying the ultimate weapon is extremely high." Only the 2 of them knew about the threat of the ultimate weapon going out of control and did not disclose it to anyone else. Therefore, the chief of the laboratory was the most determined person to oppose it. But Strack had made up his mind. He glanced at the chief and coldly said, "If I give you a little more time, can you eliminate the risk?" The chief of the laboratory immediately stopped talking. Every word and deed within Hydra is a military order. If you dare to agree to something that cannot be done, you will really lose your head. The brain tissue of the ultimate weapon all have been removed, but the latter still retains its own thinking ability and psychological activities. The chief of the laboratory asked himself, if he cannot study this subject that violates the rules of physics, then if he is given more time, the ultimate weapon will be out of control. The crisis still exists. Then Strack sneered again and continued, "Obviously, you can't. Moreover, even if I want to give you some time, I can no longer do it. The Avengers have already come to your door, but our internal agents have not received any information. At this moment, we have to prepare for the worst, compared with the Avengers charging into the base, the risks hidden by the ultimate weapon are completely acceptable. The lesser of two evils, this is Straker's final decision. The Baron gave the order, and the laboratory chief felt a bitter taste in his mouth, but in the end he could only obey the order. The Avengers located in the outer defense system of the base are still advancing at a crazy pace. And inside the Hydra base, they are not idle either. After Baron Strucker gave the order, the laboratory chief took action. He personally came to the laboratory, arranged for his subordinates to dig out the huge petri dish, and then started transporting it to the battlefield. According to Hydra's internal plan, this giant petri dish will be transported directly to the frontline battlefield. Then crush it in front of the Avengers. And then it has nothing to do with Hydra, but the conflict between the ultimate weapon and the Avengers. This task is neither difficult nor easy, but the degree of danger is there. Logically speaking, the big shot as the chief of the laboratory should stay in the safest command room and not have to go to the front line in person. But the chief took the initiative to apply for transportation of the ultimate weapon directly to the mission location. He said it himself, "I have conducted many experiments on the ultimate weapon step by step, and no one knows the ultimate weapon better than me. Therefore, no one knows more about how to successfully transport the ultimate weapon to the battlefield and let it attack the Avengers than me." The chief's selflessness and wholehearted consideration for Hydra really moved many Hydra warriors. But in fact, the chief of the laboratory had other ideas in mind. "If you don't run, you won't be able to escape. After transporting this weapon up, I was freed from the shackles of the Hydra base. Running away directly was the best option. Come to think of it, no one in this chaotic battlefield would go out of their way to cause trouble for me." With this thought in his heart, the chief transported the giant petri dish all the way out of the underground Hydra base and finally came to the surface. The whole process went smoothly. Along the way, the chief felt that the surrounding temperature was a bit cold, and his neck was chilly. But seeing that the plan was successfully implemented, he felt a little excited. "Straker, don't blame me, your ship is about to sink. I have to think about myself and find a way out." Single quote. He apologized in his heart, then looked at his subordinates, pointed to the front of the battle line and ordered, "Continue to transport the ultimate weapon forward for 3 kilometers, and then snipe the petri dish to pieces remotely. At that distance, the ultimate weapon will meet the Avengers, and then we can sit on the mountain and watch the fight between tigers and tigers." All the subordinates nodded and agreed. The excited Hydra warrior wanted to ask, "Where are you going, sir?" But after all, the identity gap was here, so they didn't dare to ask. Seeing that things were arranged properly, the laboratory chief asked C-Track's final mission was completed, and he turned around and prepared to run away. "Straker, now that it's done, I'm worthy of you." But as soon as he took a step out, he heard an extremely clear sound of glass breaking. The sound was very clear and violent, which shows how excellent and massive the texture of the glass that caused the sound was. But it was also just at this moment, the laboratory chief's heart went cold. It was called a cold blow. Such a close distance, and there was such a clear sound of breaking glass. What else could it be? It's impossible that those Hydra warriors misheard his words and smashed the giant petri dish on the spot, right? There are not many normal people in Hydra, but none of them are fools. "Well, where are you going?" A calm voice came from behind. Not much emotion could be heard, but the whole body of the laboratory chief was cold to the bone. Woolwell is the name of the laboratory chief, because his status is not low and his authority is very high. And because of his deliberate concealment, even within the base, most people only address him as Chief. As for the real name of the laboratory chief, not many people really know. Neither Wanda nor Quicksilver know. But this name was shouted out by the person behind him, if the person standing behind him could still be called a person. Woolwell turned around tremblingly and saw a naked Asian young man standing there, looking at him expressionlessly. And a group of Hydra warriors who were transporting giant petri dishes lay down on the ground silently, making no movement. The most eye-catching thing is undoubtedly the huge petri dish, which has been shattered from the middle. The nutrient solution and other liquids inside flowed all over the floor, and the most important, ultimate weapon, among them was long gone. There is no ultimate weapon on the scene, but there is a clean young man. His identity can be understood after a little thought. I didn't think about where to go. Just hearing a pop, the chief's legs were paralyzed and he knelt down on the ground. He explained, and then hurriedly begged for mercy. Please forgive me. I'm just following orders. The young man opposite laughed when he heard this. It seems that you know something about me. I know that in Eastern etiquette, the ceremony of kneeling and worshipping is very solemn, so I pray that my heart will be softened. But why? Rorschach stood there and sighed deeply. When I was in the laboratory, I was like fish on a chopping board, making a shrill scream. Why haven't you ever felt soft-hearted? The words were plain, but the context contained endless indignation. Woolwell, as the only person on the field facing all this, really felt it vividly. He opened his mouth, and Abba wanted to explain a few words, but he couldn't even say a word to excuse himself. Then he gritted his teeth, turned around and walked towards the secret passage of the Hydra base again. He hoped that the 1/10,000th chance of life would be captured by him. I also hope that Rorschach has just escaped from the petri dish, and there is still a process of adaptation, which will allow him to seize this opportunity and escape into the base. Luo Sha just watched quietly, as if he really hadn't gotten used to his body yet. Just let Woolwell run into the passage. Then, Woolwell fell completely into despair. Because he can't open this channel. Even if the Avengers attack now, with his authority as the chief of the laboratory, he should be able to open the base passage. But he was locked out, and the channel did not respond to the instructions he entered. Woolwell's transformation from hope to despair took just such a short moment. At the same time, he quickly uncovered the truth and identified the culprit. Straker. Woolwell raised his head in despair, looked at the camera on the side of the passage, and howled and roared with extreme resentment. It was Baron Strucker who closed the passage and sealed the entrance. The only one who owns this base is the Baron. The authority can override the laboratory chief, making all his instructions useless. It seems you have been abandoned. Just like I used to be, like a tattered doll, thrown aside casually. Do you know what that feels like? The sound of light footsteps came from behind. Rorschach had already approached Woolwell unhurriedly, not worried about the chief escaping. Even though Baron Strucker opened the door and let the chief of the laboratory escape, he couldn't save his own life in the base. It was just that Rorschach spent a little more effort and punched a few more times to forcefully destroy the subway gate of the base with external force. Please let me go, I'm really just following orders. Woolwell turned around, looked at Rorschach with extreme grief and fear, and begged for mercy. I still have a family, I still have children to support. Please, I can't die. Rorschach stopped. Woolwell thought that these words were effective and was about to pursue the victory. However, he only heard Rorschach sarcastically respond to him. The family and children you are talking about are your wife who takes Hydra money, spends money lavishly, goes to high-end clubs every day, and plays karaoke at night. You are still the mentally ill son who has tortured and killed 4 little girls but still escaped punishment. If they stand with you, I will not hesitate to let them go to hell with you. A family must be in order. As for now, I can only unfortunately let you take the first step. Rorschach stretched out his right hand, and then slowly grasped the neck of the laboratory chief. The most powerless thing in the world is to watch death approaching step by step, but there is nothing you can do. And the most desperate thing in the world, he was lying in the laboratory, unable to control his own life or death, and could only be reduced to a knife and a fish. The former was Woolwell at this time. The latter was Rorschach's personal experience. Rorschach's right hand was like an iron pincer. He firmly grasped the fragile neck and then slowly lifted it up. Woolwell struggled and resisted, violently using up the last breath of his life to try to break free. But nothing worked. Rorschach was completely it blocked all his responses, leaving him suffocated, but he could still take a breath of fresh air. At the same time, he could clearly feel that his vitality was being lost. This feeling made Woolwell crazy, painful, and desperate. But Rorschach felt that it was not enough. It could only allow him to experience some of his past experiences. But there was no other way. There were not so many preparations at the moment, and the environment did not allow it. The method would be rougher. It's a bit rough. At least the candidates for the flag sacrifice have been chosen. I curse you. Woolwell used his last strength to struggle towards Rorschach, trying to leave a curse. Rorschach looked at him without fear, and even loosened her neck when she heard his words, allowing him to finish the sentence. He laughed and said, "I crawled out of the hell bit by bit, and you still want to curse me? Ha ha ha, I take that as a blessing." Rorschach gave Woolwell a chance. But Woolwell said half a sentence, and after hearing Rorschach laughing, his eyeballs finally bulged, his head tilted, and he died. Rorschach gave him a chance, and he died. It's useless. Waste. Rorschach threw the body aside and shook his head disdainfully. Then he looked at his right hand, a little puzzled. Even though he had killed an enemy, why did the anger in his heart not subside for a moment, but instead seemed to get more intense? I understand, it must be that this little shrimp just can't stand up to the occasion. He's not even worthy of the appetizers. Guys, come on. I will first go to the front line to investigate the battle situation and understand the details. I will tell you the specific details one by one on the channel. The peripheral defense system of the Hydra base only caused some trouble for the Avengers. As for the real threat, it did not exist. Seeing that the overall situation was decided, Tony Stark rushed to the front of the battle line. The purpose of looking at the specific situation and flying straight to the front line. In fact, as early as Jarvis detected that something was wrong with Sokovia, he had an idea in his mind and wanted to wear a strong sword and assemble a steel suit. Come here to investigate the specific situation. It's not that I'm worried about Jarvis making an own mistake. It's just that Tony Stark's big heart is used to it, and he is particularly confident in the iron suit, so he came over to investigate the details. Thoughts, it is inevitable. However, considering many factors, Tony Stark temporarily ceased his activities and became silent. At the moment, there is no more suitable opportunity than now. After all, Hulk and Thor have stronger frontal attack capabilities than Tony, but the problem is, Tony can fly freely in the sky. He is so free. The flexibility brought by the steel suit has superb strategic value. Workers, if I read it correctly, I should have locked where this Hydra base is hiding. After easily dodging some anti-aircraft artillery shelling, Tony Stark saw an old castle building, which looked like a noble fortress from the last century. But various signs showed that the shell of this ancient fortress was just a disguise. The Hydra base is hidden in the castle. According to the base model simulated by Jarvis, this Hydra base dug very deep into the ground. The castle building on the ground is just the tip of the iceberg, purely for camouflage. While Tony was talking about these base summaries to his partners, his eyes glanced at the information Jarvis had just collected, and his eyes lit up. Let me see. The nominal owner of this castle is a decorated Austrian, who is honored as a baron, and his full name is Baron Strucker. He has a high status, but there is almost no news in the international community. Low profile. If nothing unexpected happens, this Baron Strucker is either the mastermind behind this Hydra base, or has been secretly contracted by Hydra. Baron Strucker likes others to call him Lord Baron. It's not because of any weird habits. It's because he really has a title. Baron. Natasha's voice came to mind in the communication channel, with some disdain. I have met too many people with titles over the years, most of them are old antiques who cannot adapt to the new era. As far as I know, most of them are as timid as mice and like to show off their title status at every turn. I tend to think that Baron Strucker has been replaced by Hydra. The body of a real baron may not even be scum. That's all that's left. Tony nodded and approved. It should be so. He knew in his heart that Natasha was born in the famous and terrifying Red House. That place was once an enemy of the entire Western world. There were probably many Western nobles in the blood on her hands. But that is all in the past. In Tony's heart, Natasha has abandoned the darkness and turned to the light, and is now one of his own. Moreover, such a charming beauty can indeed easily give people a sense of incompatible fantasy. Treating his own people, there's no need to be so fussy about it. We are fighting fiercely on the front line, but you are chatting lively on the communicator. Captain Steve couldn't help but say something in the communicator, and then reminded Tony. Tony, after all, this is Hydra's secret base. No one knows what is hidden here. You must be careful. I still recommend that you return immediately and advance steadily with us. As long as we are together, no matter what difficulties we encounter, there is no need to be afraid. Avengers united together are invincible. After the battle in New York, the Avengers worked together to repel even the Chitauri aliens who were extremely vicious and had technological levels that far exceeded those of the Earth. Captain Steve was worried this idea came up. He is also very keen on uniting the Avengers. The power of unity is the strongest. Steve firmly believes in this. Okay, I get it. Wait, I found something wrong here. I'm afraid I won't be able to go back for the time being. Tony Stark's first half of the sentence in the communicator was still casual. But in the second half of the sentence, his tone became serious. All of his comrades also knew Tony and knew his nature well. The contrast between before and after, something is obviously wrong. What happened? Eagle Eye couldn't help but ask in the communicator. The next moment, Tony was heard exclaiming in the communicator. Then there was a rapidly approaching sonic boom exploding at a very close distance. The revenge of the communicator will be heard. Hey, my ears hurt from the shock. Rorschach went straight into the base without turning around and started killing. Instead, he turned his gaze and looked towards the sky. The Hydra base is right there, and even if something huge happens, it won't be able to run away on its own. But if you don't pay attention to this guy who appears in the sky, he will fly away. That's right, the one who was locked in Rorschach's sight and appeared in the sky at this moment was none other than Iron Man Tony Stark. He broke away from the 6-person team of the first generation of Avengers and ran to the front line alone in order to explore the situation of some Hydra bases. As a result, he didn't look at what the Hydra base hidden in the castle looked like, but he actually saw the scene where Rorschach escaped and ascended to heaven and started killing. From the physical meaning, it is also completely seeing light. Tony Stark, the memory that had been buried in the deepest part of his mind revived slightly, allowing Rorschach to remember who this person was. The passion or worship of superheroes that he once had been completely extinct with the dark experiment, and not even a trace was left. Next. What remains in Rorschach's heart at this time, apart from the endless anger, is the ultimate rational judgment of his lifelong goal. Destroy America. Destroy America. Launch the final revenge against the evil in this world, and bring down the greatest evil. His enemies would kill him 1,000 times. No, enough. And if you want to complete this plan, there will be countless obstacles and roadblocks along the way. But one thing is certain. As a native of America, as a superhero, if Rorschach wants to take revenge on America, then when he stands on the opposite side of America, the Iron Man in the sky will definitely stand on the opposite side of America. On his opposite side. This superhero has a big business, and all of it is in America. And the love of his life, the woman nicknamed Pepper Little, is all staying in America. No matter what, how is Shaw's revenge justified? This Iron Man must be on the opposite side of him. There is no doubt about this. It's really troublesome. Rorschach sighed, with a tone that seemed a little distressed. At the same time, he pulled off Woolwell's white coat and wrapped it around his waist, covering up the majestic mountain-like scenery. Of course, it's just a little trouble, not too serious. He said softly, and then bowed his knees slightly. Before Tony Stark could react, Rorschach had suddenly risen and rushed into the sky like a supersonic missile, heading straight towards Tony Stark. Tucker flew away. The extremely violent elastic jump made Rorschach's jump attack bring a harsh sonic boom as a byproduct. The human brain has a reaction limit. Tony Stark originally wanted to fight this say hello to an Asian guy in a bright suit, who is suspected of being a Hydra experiment. In his heart, he even has the idea of recruiting this experimental subject to join the light and become a superhero, of course. The premise is that you have to pass the assessment and gain the trust of the Avengers. But all these thoughts disappeared in an instant when looking at Rorschach, who was like a rocket heading straight towards him. Tony Stark immediately chose to dodge. But again, there is a limit to the reaction speed of the human brain. After the brain reacts, it takes a process to transmit it to the body. Even if this reaction process requires no matter how short time is, it still takes time. Tony Stark is extremely outstanding in this regard. He can even complete all operations in less than tenths of a second. But Rorschach suddenly ejected from the ground and charged towards him at the speed of a spark hitting the earth. The whole process also took less than a tenth of a second. Not even 0.05 seconds, not even a blink of an eye. Luo Shaw was already killed in front of him. At the critical moment, before Tony Stark could fully react, the iron suit had already taken action and performed evasive actions. Tony Stark was in shock, but he immediately understood who saved him. Well done, Jarvis. If you hadn't taken action in time, I would have definitely suffered internal bleeding this time. Yes, it was Jarvis who took action. Tony Stark had already reacted when the spark hit the Earth, but his body was still out of control. Brain, you already understand everything. Hand, what else are you going to say? But as an artificial intelligence, Jarvis is not affected by these. At this critical moment, Jarvis triggered the underlying logic, interfered with the steel suit, and saved his master. Jarvis cannot get past Tony Stark and forcefully control the iron suit. Otherwise, is Iron Man Tony Stark or Jarvis? No matter how advanced Jarvis is, no matter how highly intelligent he still belongs to the category of artificial intelligence and is limited by the most basic underlying logic of robots. The most important one is that you must obey human orders. But there are also special cases. Under certain conditions, this underlying logical red line can be crossed. That is, Jarvis determined that the next attack, if Tony Stark took it hard, would really endanger his own life, so he had to take action. The owner's life is more at risk than the underlying logic of the machine. This is the change that Tony Stark brought to Jarvis through his efforts. This function has not been used before, it only exists in program. After all, one thing is obvious, since Tony personally built the Mark steel suit, and later formed the Avengers with Hulk, Thor and others, he has almost never encountered extremely dangerous incidents. I haven't even encountered danger a few times, and a major accident that endangered my own life and death has certainly never happened once. Right now, this is the first time. This moment made Tony Stark's brain clearer. He suddenly realized that the world was still very dangerous. Although I have a lot of capital, I only have one life. In the face of death, everyone is equal. Rorschach's body was like a cannonball, and he launched an attack like pulling onions on dry land, flying into the sky like a death charge. According to this trend, Rorschach might have to travel more than 10 kilometers in the sky. When the inertial force is exhausted and gravity starts to take effect, he will fall back to the ground heavily. In the end, if nothing goes wrong, Rorschach will be like a meteor hitting the Earth, leaving a big crater on the ground. Looking at this scene from a distance, Tony Stark couldn't help but feel relieved in his heart when he saw that he was temporarily out of danger. While reporting safety to other Avengers through the communicator, he praised Jarvis and said, "Hiss, it's so scary. That moment just now was all thanks to you, Jarvis. Just the brute force of this guy's collision. If this head hit me, I might as well shake out all my dinner yesterday." Jarvis reminded Tony Stark in an unprecedented serious tone. "Sir, please be careful and guard against being attacked by an offensive like the one just now, not even the slightest touch." Tony was a little stunned when he heard this. Why, could this suspected Hydra experimental body and his straight attacks relying solely on brute force destroy Mark's suit? Jarvis opened his mouth and explained. "Sir, Mark's suit is mixed with vibranium, the strongest metal on Earth. It is the metal used to forge Captain Steve's shield. No attack has been found that can destroy vibranium. But sir, although vibranium is indestructible, this does not mean that it will not deform or conduct force to the inside. Sir, based on the model created by the potential energy just now, it is inferred that the attack of this suspected Hydra experimental subject is likely to cause the shell of the Mark suit to deform after colliding with it. If you take a step back, even if the Mark suit it was intact, and it really withstood that terrifying offensive head-on, but how to resolve such a terrifying inertial potential energy?" Jarvis said in an extremely serious tone. "The impact transmitted through the suit is enough to crush an elephant into pulp. Sir, you are a mortal body, you are not vibranium." Tony Stark fell silent after hearing this. Comparing the hardness of vibranium, he is not that stupid. At this time, Jarvis suddenly spoke again to remind. "Please be careful, sir. The attacker, who is suspected to be a Hydra experimental subject, seems to be preparing to launch the next wave of offensive." After hearing this, Tony was obviously a little confused. He has obviously soared into the sky. He can't fly, so why can he attack me if he just falls by inertia? Tony looked up in disbelief and looked up at the sky. He saw Rorschach in midair, and he didn't know where to find some leverage. After flying to an altitude of 5,000 meters in the sky, he obviously hadn't reached the highest altitude yet, because his inertial potential energy was still huge, and he was still climbing rapidly. But at this moment, he stretched out his feet, raised his thighs 180 degrees, and then stepped hard on the high position. Tony Stark also I didn't see any foothold in the air, let alone a place to draw strength. But Rorschach seemed to have really caught the force in the sky, stepped on something, and suddenly turned back in midair, exploding at an even more terrifying straight-line speed. It shot over like lightning. The target was still directed at Iron Man Tony Stark. But luckily, the straight-line distance this time was at least 5,000 meters. How terrifying Rorschach's initial speed was, it is impossible to cross a long distance of 5 kilometers in the blink of an eye. To do everything in a fraction of a second, it is really difficult for Tony, who is still a human being, as a billionaire. But if there is only 1 second, if there is even more time, then there will be no problem. Facing Rorschach's attack, Tony Stark did not rely on Jarvis's assistance and relied on his own reflexes to dodge this attack. Boom. There was just a loud noise. Like an intercontinental missile, Rorschach hit the ground hard, kicking up a large amount of dust, mud and rocks. When the dust and smoke gradually dispersed, Rorschach's figure slowly walked out of the pit. He came out. He wrapped it around his waist, and the white coat that covered the majestic scenery was now in tatters, and could only barely cover it. Rorschach had no other ideas at the moment. What he wanted most was the one from the Hulk. A pair of pants that won't be torn no matter how much you tear them. Tony looked at Rorschach, who was covered in dust and mist, walking out of the pit intact. His mood was extremely horrified, and he shouted that the other person was not a human being. He backed away repeatedly at this time. He tried his best to keep a straight line distance from Rorschach. At this time, he also discovered that in an asymmetrical battle where contact means death and contact means death, the best way to deal with it is to keep the distance. Only space can be exchanged for time, and there is enough reaction time can maximize the possibility of survival. It wasn't until 2 familiar and burly figures appeared beside him that Tony's heart calmed down a lot and he felt a little more at ease. Hulk and Thor came from next to Tony. One walked out on the left and the other on the right, standing on both sides, looking like Iron Man's right-hand man. Thor looked at Rorschach in the distance and immediately frowned. Who is that? A secret weapon developed by Hydra? Or some other super powerful individual? Being able to beat Tony Stark back again and again, judging from the sound effects of the previous communicator, it can even be called a dangerous situation. Such terrifying results must not be taken lightly. No matter what it is, as long as we are together, the United Avengers are invincible. Captain Steve came over from behind and stood with the 3 of them, confronting Rorschach in the distance. He frowned slightly, and the man opposite gave him a strange feeling. He immediately glanced at Hulk and frowned. It gets even more powerful. Something's wrong. Hulk usually looks ferocious and violent no matter who he sees. Even when he is face to face with us, he will roar loudly. But why are you standing in front of that Hydra? Why do I feel that there is no hostility emerging from Hulk? Right, that is it. 1 versus 6. Use your own power to fight against the entire Avengers. This is right. This is my ultimate weapon. Ha 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 ha, the ultimate weapon. Come on, the ultimate weapon. Kill all these superheroes. Inside the Hydra base, from the command room, Baron Strucker's crazy laughter came from. Tell the world, you are the strongest. Tell everyone that I am the strongest. He devoted all his attention to the big screen. Everything that happened in front of him was the love of his life. His life's hard work and his life's carefully crafted masterpiece will be shined today. For him at this moment said that all other things are no longer important and can be kept out of it. His only focus is on Rorschach outside the base. Especially when Rorschach meets the Avengers head-on and starts a confrontation. The wind even vaguely gained the upper hand, and then the wave completely surged to the top of the clouds. The other Hydra warriors were as silent as a cicada, and did not dare to speak at all at this moment. They had witnessed with their own eyes that the power in the base was the chief of the laboratory was locked up outside the base by the Baron to use it as a sacrifice for the ultimate weapon. As the saying goes, kill the chicken to scare the monkeys. The chief of the laboratory has turned into that chicken, so they, the little shrimps, can they be called monkeys? They looked at the increasingly crazy Baron and did not dare to say a word. For fear of causing displeasure, they walked into the Chief Lord's retreat. That is, in this extremely complicated and obviously abnormal situation. Wanda grabbed Kuayan's sleeve and left the command room calmly. To outsiders, it looked like he didn't dare to be in the same room with the Baron, so he took a little break for a while. It was very wise. But Wanda had other plans. She just seized this opportunity and ran away decisively with Quicksilver. What is this for? This time we can finally see the true strength of our partner. Just when I was looking at the most exciting moment, why did you drag me away, Wanda? Quicksilver was looking very excited at this time. As a result, he was pulled out of the command room by Wanda. It was Wanda who came to pull him. If it were other people, Quicksilver wouldn't be able to get rid of them. Wanda was unprecedented at this time. She was calm and her brain was running at high speed. She glanced at Kuayan and asked, "You are focused on the battlefield, but what about the others?" Quicksilver scratched his head. "Probably, it's the same as what I thought. Didn't you see the look on Baron Strucker's face? It was absolutely mesmerizing, it was outrageous, I had never seen him like this before. That guy is usually very cold-blooded and cruel. I have almost never seen him lose his rationality. This is the first time." Wanda nodded gently. "That's right. Now, when everyone is focusing on the battlefield, it is our turn to use this time to complete our mission. Taking advantage of this time point, we do what we should do. Even if we make some noise, it will most likely not attract other people's attention." Kuayan is not a fool. After thinking about it for a moment, he realized. "You mean, Loki's scepter?" Wanda nodded heavily. "That's right, it's Loki's scepter. We have reached a cooperative relationship with that Rorschach, and you also saw his performance when facing Iron Man before." Straker wasn't bragging. "Rorschach really has the strength to complete our revenge goal. Correspondingly, our mission must be completed. Rorschach only told us one thing, and that is Loki's scepter. I think there is no time more appropriate than now." Kuayan also came back to his senses. Hearing this, he nodded repeatedly and agreed very much. "You were right. Everyone is attracted by the battlefield situation outside. We can indeed do some things inside the base, but the problem is that the secret room where Loki's scepter is placed must require permission. It is very likely that the permission is only Strack has it. How do we get Loki's scepter? Relying on our strength to break through the iron wall." Quicksilver said this with a confused look on his face. Both he and Wanda are very capable, and coupled with the particularity of their superpowers, they are even more difficult to detect. But the problem is, they are all good at it. It's not the type of attacking difficulties. If you force your way into the secret room, I'm afraid there won't be any big problems. Speaking of this, Wanda showed an extremely confident look on her face. "You don't know this, I have obtained permission from Strucker in advance. I found an excuse to come into contact with Loki's scepter, so that I could sense the psychological activities of the ultimate weapon." Straker believed this argument and asked me to go to the laboratory every day to use my abilities. The authority to open the secret room of Loki's scepter is still with me. Kuayan couldn't help but be overjoyed when he heard this. "Very good. Quick, let's act immediately." The two reached an agreement, and when they launched their plan, their subsequent actions were smooth sailing, and they reached the secret room without any hindrance. Looking at Loki's scepter in the center of the secret room, Wanda did not hesitate and went straight to it. Breaking the outer glass, she held Loki's scepter in her hand. At the same time, the alarm sounded loudly. If Loki's scepter was still on the glass table, there would be no problem. Wanda had only been in contact with it before, and he was not taken away from the glass table. Today, even the glass cover was directly smashed. It was obvious that it was forced. If there was no alarm, then the security work within Hydra was really lax. "Next, it's up to you." The alarm bells sounded, but Wanda was not worried at all. She looked at Kuayan and gave the latter unparalleled trust. Kuayan nodded heavily and said extremely seriously, "Don't worry, leave everything to me. Those idiots, they can't even catch us by the hem of our clothes." Then Quicksilver was seen gently holding Wanda's hand. In the next moment, both of them disappeared without a trace. When the speed reaches a certain level, this teleport phenomenon will occur. As the alarm sounded, there was chaos inside the Hydra base. "Lord Baron, what should we do?" "Hydra, who was under investigation and surveillance, stood up and asked. Lord Baron, according to the surveillance report, Gemini betrayed us. They forced their way into the secret room and took away Loki's scepter. Do you think we are? He did not dare to continue speaking, but asked Strucker for orders. Gemini is special inside the base. Wanda and Quicksilver were not insiders, trained by Hydra since childhood. They were considered two outsiders. As a result, they gained superpowers due to an experiment and transformed into high-level officials of the base. The results of it, as expected, these two outsiders betrayed Hydra. There was no anger on Straker's face. His eyes were still fixed on the big screen, watching the confrontation on the battlefield. After hearing the report from his subordinates, he showed a very impatient expression. Immediately carry out blockade work inside the base, and shoot the two traitors immediately when they see them. Then he didn't know what he thought of, his face changed slightly, and he yelled loudly. If you want to see people alive, you want to see their corpses if they die. If possible, try to capture Gemini alive in front of me. I would like to ask the two of them carefully whether they have been rebellious for a long time or whether they are affected by other factors. Baron Strucker's eyes fell on Rorschach on the big screen, with complex expressions in his eyes, but soon he became even more excited. I should be happy. If it's like I think, the betrayal of Gemini is because of the ultimate weapon. That only shows that the ultimate weapon I created is so perfect. With such outstanding intelligence, he doesn't even have basic brain tissue parts, he has no weaknesses, it's so perfect. My ultimate weapon, the more perfect you are, the happier I feel in my heart. Did you get the scepter? After Wanda and Quicksilver took Loki's scepter out of the secret room together. Just across a base, a distance underground and a surface, Rorschach finally vaguely noticed the fluctuations emanating from the Mind Stone. Unable to escape if anything unexpected happened, it was Wanda and Quicksilver who were taking action to complete the mission he had previously assigned. Well done, I will have to work harder next, otherwise I will end up being the one holding back, which would be really embarrassing. Rorschach clenched his right fist and muttered to himself. The Avengers who were confronting Rorschach in the distance also had their own thoughts. Captain Steve looked at Rorschach's current dress, and he didn't look like 9. He looked like an elite warrior with the head snake. He looked more like he had just been released from prison after serving his sentence in the laboratory. He couldn't help but loudly persuaded him to surrender. I'm Steve Rogers, Captain America Steve. You should have heard of my name in the work on the opposite side. We are here for Hydra, and there is a secret base of Hydra hidden under this castle. Work, it looks like you came from inside, but I don't know your specific identity. Job, if Hydra has conducted cruel experiments on you, then you can come to us and we can eradicate this Hydra base together. Steve sent an invitation to Rorschach. But Rorschach just clenched his fist and felt his power. He didn't seem to hear Steve's invitation at all. When Thor saw this scene, he immediately became distraught. He was happy. He himself was also affected by being dumped by his girlfriend, and he was in a very bad mood. Seeing Luo Shaw's indifferent attitude, he felt even more irritable. Steve, I think you've wasted your efforts. Saul snorted softly and complained. The warriors created by Hydra from the laboratory seem to have been brainwashed. They are all die-hard loyalists of Hydra. Look at him, he's not paying attention to you at all, so don't bother. When Steve heard this, he shook his head seriously and corrected. Most of them are like this, they have been completely brainwashed, but there are exceptions, and there are people who change their minds. As soon as Thor heard this, he knew that Steve was thinking of his good friend Bucky the Winter Soldier. The latter is a typical person who was perfectly brainwashed, but still not completely brainwashed, and still has his own thinking ability from time to time. Case. Thor immediately stopped talking. He knew that Steve usually didn't have many hobbies, but he was particularly persistent when it came to matters related to Bucky. Thor had no intention of changing Steve's mind. Naturally, just stay silent and wait and see. But then again, why is it so quiet? Single quote. Saul had a doubt in his heart. He looked up at Hulk, only to find that the Hulk, who was known for his violent temper, was extremely quiet at this time. He did not yell continuously, so he seemed unusually quiet, and Thor was not used to it. The Hulk looked at Rorschach from a distance, his expression tangled, but he showed no hostility. Saul had a bad feeling in his heart. Manual labor. Steve spoke again, wanting to say something. But Rorschach, who had further adapted to his body, was not ready to talk nonsense with him. The next moment, Rorschach thundered on the ground, and then launched like a missile, leaving 2 deep pits on the spot, and then hit Steve directly. Steve's excellent fighting sense kept him from being completely unresponsive. He instinctively raised the star-striped shield with his backhand and held it in front of him. Then I saw him and his shield being kicked out together, drawing an arc of more than 10 meters in the air, and hitting the ground heavily. "Steve," Thor exclaimed, but he didn't have time to care about the captain's injury. He had already exerted all his strength, holding the hammer in his right hand and smashed it towards Rorschach. This blow was packed with the power of thunder. Thor is worthy of being the god of thunder in Nordic mythology. The heaven and earth thundered in an instant. Rorschach flew over with a kick, and after kicking Steve away, he was not disrupted by Thor's rapid offensive. He only saw him raising his right hand seemingly lightly. Standing tall, he resisted Thor's blow. Even though he could faintly smell the smell of burnt meat coming from his right hand, Rorschach remained unmoved. The minor injuries caused by lightning strikes and fire, and compared with what I suffered in the laboratory, it is nothing at all. What kind of monster are you? Seeing that Rorschach took the blow calmly, and even though he was injured, his expression did not change at all. Thor's eyes widened and he couldn't help but question. Rorschach looked at his shocked expression, but he was calm. He replied, "It's my turn." The next moment, Rorschach stretched out his left hand, slapped him out, and flew straight to Sol's door. "Ah!" Thor screamed in pain. Half of his face visible to the naked eye swelled, and it seemed that 2 teeth could be seen vaguely flying somewhere. This slap did not make Thor fly away, but instead stimulated Thor. The fighting spirit in Ur's heart made him grit his teeth and fight with Rorschach. The sky was furious and changed, and the power of endless thunder fell from the sky, all pouring into Thor's hammer, and then it was transmitted into Thor's body, provides him with energy supply, and also gives him the capital to continue fighting with Rorschach. But capital is capital, and it will always be spent. Rorschach and Thor both hold on to the thunder god's power. Hammer, never give up, especially Thor's hammer, secretly pulling the bias towards Thor, otherwise it would have been taken away by Rorschach. One hand is holding the hammer and cannot be abandoned, but Rorschach has another free hand. In a few seconds, he continuously and intimately caressed Sol's face dozens of times, until he was beaten into a pig's head. Sol was not to be outdone, and slapped him with at least 10 slaps. Rorschach's face was not swollen at all. Sol remained in a stalemate until the end, feeling vaguely desperate. What on earth did the guy opposite him go through in the past? He received 30,000 slaps every day to train himself to resist blows. Is it capable? He couldn't stand it anymore, so he turned to look at Hulk. "Hulk, what are you still doing standing there? Come and help me." In Thor's opinion, Rorschach is definitely not a good person. At this time, there is no need to pay attention to the moral principles of the world. Let's beat him side by side. However, the Hulk has been standing nearby indifferently for a long time, and it is not without reason. Hearing Thor's words, he suddenly became furious. He raised his hands high, but instead of launching an attack, he smashed them heavily on the ground. Hulk never attacks his friends. After hearing these words, Sol was immediately dumbfounded. Is he your friend? This Hydra? No, this experimental subject is your friend. Then why didn't you tell me earlier? Thor was holding a pig's head on his head, and the series of slaps he and Rorschach were fighting each other stopped. Rorschach also stopped further attacks, and looked at Hulk with some curiosity and confusion. I don't know that this green man. Why did the giant say this? Because one thing is obvious, this is the first time Rorschach has come into contact with the Hulk face to face. Before this, both Dr. Banner and the Hulk had only been seen on the film and television screen. I have been there, to the extent that Rorschach has met other people, but they have never met him at all. Thor doesn't know these things. He thought that the friends Hulk said were friends in the physical sense. Just like the relationship between Captain Steve and Winter Soldier Bucky, they were good friends with irrefutable evidence before. Even if they were captured and brainwashed by Hydra afterwards, they could still recall their good friends from time to time in their minds. Picture. If he's your friend, why didn't you tell me earlier? Hulk, Hurry up, get your friend to stop, look at the commotion this has caused, there is no need to fight with fists and kicks. Saul's tone and attitude were as if a flood had washed away the Dragon King temple, and he was still a little aggrieved. His face now looked like a pig's head. The result was unexpected, but in the end it was a misunderstanding. Come on, this hatred is not the law has paid off. If Rorschach knew what he was thinking, he might not have burst out laughing and told him to take revenge. Seeing that Hulk was still standing there without moving, Thor couldn't help but urge him again. Hulk, don't just stand there, take action, catch up with your friend, and this war won't have to be fought. Hulk was moved by Thor, but his expression was a little awkward. I don't know him. This sentence suddenly made Saul lay angry on the outside and tender on the inside. The first sentence said that Rorschach was his friend. The second sentence said that he did not know Rorschach, although he had long known that his comrade was crazy and very irritable. But Saul never imagined that the famous scientist Dr. Banner would have entered the stage of Alzheimer's disease early. Then do it, Thor suddenly yelled angrily, signaling Hulk to attack quickly and join him in a righteous 2-on-1 fight. Unexpectedly, when Hulk heard these words, his face suddenly changed again, and he hammered himself hard with both hands. On his chest, he yelled, "Hulk never hurts his friends." After saying this, Hulk left angrily. Thor and the other Avengers were left standing there with dumbfounded expressions. Rorschach looked thoughtful after watching the whole process, and understood the reason for Hulk's change in expression. In today's Hulk, Dr. Banner and Hulk are still two independent thinking entities, and have not reached an agreement. After transforming into the Hulk, the person in charge of the body is naturally the Hulk. If it is Dr. Banner, it must have nothing to do with Rorschach. When Thor asked for help before, Dr. Banner did not hesitate and rushed forward and started beating him. But if it were Hulk, the situation would be completely different. I have been exposed to gamma rays. Although the final effect is different from that of the Hulk, tracing back to the source, there are still certain similarities. If it were Bruce Banner, he would naturally not notice anything, but if it were the Hulk, he has an extremely keen perception of this phenomenon, and he discovered that I am his kind. Hulk doesn't understand what similar means, no one knows. But judging from the current situation, Hulk must have confused similar with friends. That's a good thing for Rorschach. But for the Avengers, it's huge bad news. Watching Hulk disappear on the battlefield, Rorschach confirmed that the latter had really left, then turned to look at Thor again. A smile couldn't help but appear on his expressionless face. Hulk left, but you are finished. When Thor heard this, he suddenly felt something bad. The next moment, Rorschach suddenly exerted force on his hands and added more strength. In Thor's horrified expression, he saw the thunder god who was famous in the 9 realms. On the surface of the hammer, Rorschach forcefully pinched the inside of the hammer, and 5 fingerprints were made. Iron Man flew in the air and fired dozens of small cannonballs at Rorschach's back, but it had no effect. Rorschach stood firmly on the ground, motionless. These shells seemed to only explode a pile of gunpowder smoke that filled the battlefield, without any actual effect. But at this moment, Captain Steve he rushed out from the smoke cover, hugged Rorschach directly behind his body, and then performed a set of almost perfect grappling skills. This set of grappling movements is very standard. Used against ordinary people, it can instantly make them lose resistance. Ability can only be weak and at the mercy of others. However, no matter how perfect it is, this set of grappling skills is still used to deal with ordinary people. Rorschach is no ordinary person. After Captain Steve captured Rorschach, he prepared to use his strength to remove Rorschach's joints and render him incapacitated. But the next moment, he was awkwardly living there. Because no matter how much strength he exerted, Rorschach's arm joints still seemed to be made of vibranium iron, motionless. A few small pieces fell down. That's a fragment of Thor's hammer. Thor's hammer was really destroyed by this guy. For a moment, Steve, Thor and others were stunned, with disbelief on their faces. Basically, anyone who has a little knowledge of Norse mythology will know what kind of artifact Thor's hammer is. The superheroes of the Avengers have a deep understanding of this. It can be said that those who have not been recognized by Thor's hammer cannot even hold the hammer, let alone wield it in battle. As a result, Rorschach did not hold the hammer and lift it up, he just crushed it. Rorschach held one hand on the hammer head, holding on to the thousands of thunder and lightning from Thor's hammer, and stood there unmoved. But as he gradually increased his strength, even though Thor's hammer was indestructible, it was still somewhat unbearable. The surface of the hammer head slowly deformed, and small pieces fell to the ground. Those fragments that fell to the ground still had electric snakes swimming around on the surface. They looked very scary and majestic, but in Rorschach's opinion, all this was just the last struggle before death. It is equivalent to the last breath before death. It looks scary, but everyone who deserves to die must swallow this breath and face his own death. Thor just watched helplessly as his beloved was crushed into countless pieces bit by bit in front of him and fell to the ground. He originally held the handle of the hammer with one hand, but it looked like he was locked in a stalemate with Rorschach. But now it seems that Rorschach just made a little joke with him instead of taking it by force. At this moment, as Rorschach gently let go of his hand, Thor suddenly grasped Thor's hammer with only the handle remaining under the trend of inertia, and blasted back dozens of meters, falling and rolling several times. But Saul couldn't feel the physical pain at this time. All he could think about at the moment was the heartache. My hammer, Mjolnir, he wailed and let out a cry of sorrow. Mjolnir is the correct name of Thor's hammer. But in comparison, everyone is accustomed to calling it Thor's hammer. And now, this prestigious artifact, just destroyed in front of everyone's eyes. Even if it is not destroyed in my hands now, it will fall into the hands of your cheap sister in the future. Why don't you let me do it, and let me test my grip strength level to see how it is? For you, it's not completely useless. Long-term pain is worse than short-term pain. Rorschach glanced at Thor, who was extremely sad and furious, and complained in his heart. Then he did not rest, but stretched out his hand to grab the Captain Steve behind him. The famous Captain Amy. At this time it can be said that the posture has no aesthetic sense at all. Even the strong man's grappling and fighting skills were displayed, but when he encountered Rorschach, this unreasonable existence, it was completely useless. Steve saw Mjolnir being crushed, and his heart I was also shocked. That hammer was a divine weapon, and it ended up like this. If Luo Sha was caught with one hand now, what would be a good ending? Although he is a 50-50 captain with a good reputation, but didn't you see that there was another captain who claimed that he could fight for 3 days and 3 nights without getting tired, and then he was cut into 2 on the spot? Steve asked himself, his physical strength should not be as strong as Thor. Hammer. So when Rorschach reached out to grab it, Steve quickly wanted to get away, regroup and fight again. What kind of monster did Hydra create? There is too little information about him, and we don't know anything about his combat level or ability. And Thor's hammer. He could crush Thor's hammer. The shock in his heart, like a mountain and a tsunami, made Steve's skills much more flexible, trying to escape from Rorschach's grasp. But no matter how sharp his skills were, one hand was as if it had come out of hell. Something stretched out and lived on his shoulder with an extremely vicious force. Steve didn't even have a chance to scream out. His whole body was completely off balance under the influence of a huge force. Next one moment, Steve was flying into the sky. The next moment, he hit the ground hard. I saw Rorschach grabbing half of Steve's shoulder with one hand, and then holding him on the ground in front of and behind him. After beating him hard, Steve had an unprecedented intimate contact with the earth for the first time. Of course, there was no chance for Steve to express his feelings. Blood overflowed from his body. When I came out, my pupils began to dilate and spread. It was obvious that I was starting to lose consciousness. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.